7 days and 23 pounds of hamburger later, it's now time to review my WOBO hamburger edition. Let's do it. Well, hamburger week is over. Thank God. I've had enough hamburger to last me a while. So it's time to recap and review what happened. And what I'm going to do at the beginning of this video is Mike at KetOMAD had come up with 20 questions about this little experience. And I'm going to do sort of see if I can construct a virtual interview with Mike and answer those questions. He's done some live interviews with 3 that I know of that he's posted at his KetOMAD channel, and frankly, I've watched the 3 of them, and so far, they're probably the best thing about Hamburger Week, in my opinion. They're great, all of them. You know, these were interviews with just folks, commenters who'd said, you know, they would do the Hamburger Week, and it was just wonderful to you know, not only put a name, put a face with a name, but also a personality and a style and a sense of that person and how they, what their experiences are in life and health issues and how they attack the carnivore lifestyle. I found it fascinating, and in fact, I recommend go check them out. Any of the I talked last week. I said I think a few people on my channel had mentioned that they would participate also in the Hamburger Week. If you did, go ahead and, if you care to, answer the questions in the comment section of this video. Maybe there's not space to all of them. Answer the pertinent questions, or just tell, you know, whatever you think is relevant that others might want to know about your experience. I mean, I think everyone finds that part of it interesting. So share as much as you can. I encourage you to do that. So yeah, I guess that's about it for this opening. I'll just probably start off answering Mike's questions, and then later on, after I'm done with that, I'll probably want to expand on a few of them from my viewpoint, and kind of outline where I'm going to go next with this, because I've decided I'm not quite done with it yet. So anyway, here's my virtual interview with Mike from KetOMAD on the 20 questions about my WOBO week of hamburger. Okay, here we go.
The first question that I'll ask is, what did you hope to learn or gain by doing WOBO?
Before this Hamburger Week, I'd been carnivore, I think I'm in my eighth or ninth month now. But I'd never fully went to the meat and water type of elimination. I was doing mostly beef and a fair amount of pork, but I also had things like eggs, cheese, pork rinds, avocado. I had cream in my coffee, kind of these extra little items to give me some variation. And in the back of my mind, I always wondered if I was missing something, if maybe eliminating that stuff, there might be benefits to it. And so what I'd hoped to learn by doing the Hamburger Week was just that. eliminate everything down to beef, water, salt and pepper, and learn something about myself or about my my fixation with those other little foods that fascinated me. Do I really need them or not? So that's what this test was about for me, to learn something basically.
2. To what source of influence would you attribute your interest in an all-meat diet?
It started last summer, and I think it went something like this. It was sort of a cascade of different people that I noticed pop up on both Twitter and YouTube. And I have to say probably the first one would be Dr. Shawn Baker, of course. He's active in social media, and he's got a big story, and you know, it caught my eye. Here's a guy in his 50s and promoting all-meat diet and fantastic health and world records and huge strength, and so that caught my eye, and from there then I started investigating a little bit. The next one that I recall was a presentation by Amber O'Hearn, and it was, again, I think it was last summer or fall, on carnivory, the human diet. I think it was, I forget the title, but it was from Amber last summer, I believe, and it was about how, you know, it made the case for carnivory from more or less from a scientific standpoint, from a historical standpoint. And next was Dr. Georgia Eid. I saw one of her presentations on plants, and it was another you know, another focal point. It was like, wow, you know, I'm starting to see paint a picture here. And from there it led to, I remember the first case study that I read was the fascinating story of Kelly Hogan. I think it was on her blog, and she had just this incredible transformation, and very well documented. And then finally after that it was the blog Zerocarbzen. Once I found that, which has something like 30 or 40 different testimonials, and that was it. That kind of painted the picture for me. I saw all these people, you know, having results that seemed phenomenal, really. I mean, curing themselves, thriving, enjoying life, strength, and I was ready for a new adventure at that point, something new to explore. I'd kind of come off of all my weight loss part of the journey, and I was ready now for something else. And I said at that point, after those cascade contacts that I had worked up on social media, I decided to take the plunge and do a test, and I never looked back. I'm still testing, although I'm a carnivore. I'm still testing different things. So that's how it began.
3. Were you fat adapted before tackling WOBO? More specifically, how different was WOBO from your customary style of eating?
Oh yeah, for sure. I was fat adapted when I started this WOBO week of beef only. I had almost virtually no carbs for a long time. Did a lot of fasting, a lot of fasted exercising, a lot of fasted long runs. So I'm really way over to the fat burning side of things. How my diet was different, it was different in terms of the things that I gave up. I gave up all beef except for ground beef. I gave up pork, everything but ground beef in terms of meat. Cheese, eggs, pork rinds, butter. That's essentially it, plus avocados. So that's the difference of the things I took out of the diet, the things I eliminated for this week.
4. Did you have any difficulty adapting to your new eating habits on WOBO?
The only difficulty I had was the very first day, the very first night. What I had for dinner that first night was I had 3 pounds of ground beef, and I cooked 1 pound in a crock pot. The first time ever I've made crock pot ground beef. I fried up another pound in a pan, and then I grilled a pound made them into patties and grilled them. I think, and when I ate the ground beef from the crock pot, I'd never done it before, and what I did is I scooped out the beef out of the crock pot, and then I ladled a lot of the fat that had rendered out onto the beef before I ate it, and it really was good. I salted it, and it was fantastic. But that night, first time since I've been a carnivore, I had an unpleasant feeling in my stomach. I was bloated and gassy. I had some issue in my stomach, and it affected my sleep that first night. And I knew it was the fat from that crock pot. Something about that was a little disagreeable. It just didn't mix well with the other stuff. I'm not sure what, but that was it. It wasn't major, but it was a little bit unpleasant. I did go back to I took a day off of the crock pot, but then I did go back to the crock pot on most of the other days, and I didn't ladle on the rendered fat on top of the beef. In fact, I strained it before I ate it, and it was fine. So I do believe it was something to do with that fat. But no other difficulty. In fact, it was, rather easy to do.
5. Was your beef grass-fed, grain-finished, or a blend of both? If you included pork, salmon, chicken, lamb, etc., please indicate that here.
The beef I had was only ground beef. It was all store brand, I'm sure grain finished type of beef. I did incorporate, the variations I had were different fat contents. I had mostly 20%. I think I had one package of 15 and several packages of 20, what is it, 23 or 27. So I tested the different fat contents. I did go to the store one day with the intent to get some grass finished. But the market I went to, I was looking at all the packages for grass finished, and they all came in from Australia, which, nothing against Australia, and I'm sure it was fine, but that isn't really, I'm more, I don't know, I didn't want to go all the way to Australia for my beef. And I'm sure if I would have went somewhere else, I could have found some domestic content, but that'll be another test. The only other, so in addition to the various fat contents and a couple different cooking methods, the other thing I tested on one night, I tried this, is to eat it raw. And I had done that because I've seen, like on Twitter, a lot of the carnivores that I follow, seems like many of them are happy with raw ground beef and really seem to get off on it. It's great. I love the taste. Just everything about it. It just sounds like the people that do it like it. So I'd be curious to try that, even though I've never really felt compelled to do so in my prior life. So I did that on the second to last night. I sat down. I had like I put like about a pound on a plate and raw, spread it around and salted it and sat down with the intent that I was going to, challenge myself and eat it. And I got into it, was eating it. And then, I don't know, somewhere about 1/3 of the way in or half of the way in, I just said, forget it. I don't care for this. I'm going to cook it. And it wasn't because it was disgusting or I just totally unpalatable. I mean, it was fine. The thing that bothers me about it is the cold texture of it. It's not what food should taste like to me. It wasn't that the taste was objectionable at all, but it just is something. It just is not appealing to me. It's just sort of gummy and cold, and I don't know. I don't care for it, whether it has other benefits or not. The taste, I didn't really notice any benefit to the taste. So I did try it. It's just raw is just not for me.
6. Did you use butter, ghee, both, neither? If you used tallow instead, was it a satisfactory substitute?
Neither. I just cooked the beef in its own fat. I didn't add any fats, ghee or butter or anything.
7. Was the elimination of cheese and sour cream especially difficult? Did you have any slip-ups or borderline transgressions?
Well, sour cream was never my issue. Cheese, I wouldn't say I had difficulty giving it up, but it is the one food that was, I think I have more trouble with than others, especially with ground beef. When I have ground beef, typically I'll want to get some really good cheese and grate it and put it on top of the warm ground beef and kind of melt it in. I love that. But the thing is, I tend to just, once I have the block of cheese out preparing it, I grate a whole bunch of a big pile. And then, of course, I, start cutting off hunks off the block and nibbling on it while I'm waiting for the meal to be ready. And, it takes an effort to not just eat the whole block of cheese. I mean, literally I could. And so this test, I mean, cheese was the one I wanted to kind of break off of and maybe reduce my cravings for. I didn't really have any issue having no cheese this week. I did think about it a few times when I was preparing the ground beef. Oh, this would be nice to have some cheese on it, but it wasn't especially difficult. No.
8. Did you notice any impact on your waistline, weight, or complexion after WOBO?
Yes. Weight. Throughout the week, my weight steadily dropped. I did rebound some on the last day. I recovered like 0.6 pounds, but overall for the week, I was down 2.6 pounds, which I wasn't expecting, and that's a lot for me to lose in a week at this point. But it was fairly more in the beginning. So it might have been just maybe some kind of adaptation, and it kind of leveled off. And like I said, the last day I actually gained weight, which was pretty much the first time of the week I gained weight. But yeah, for the week down 2.6 pounds. Complexion and waistline, I didn't notice anything on complexion. Waistline, I don't know, it's iffy. I mean, I can never really get the same number twice on the waistline. I just have real trouble checking it. It looks like maybe a 1/4 inch, possibly, but I'm not sure about that.
9. Did WOBO bring about changes in sleep, mood, energy levels, or gastrointestinal inflammatory autoimmune conditions?
The only two that I will mention two things. Sleep and gastrointestinal issues. I mentioned earlier, the first night I had that issue with the fat that kept me up. I lost some sleep and had some bloating in my stomach. That was the only issue I had, and it was a temporary one-time thing. The other one, though, I do want to talk about a little bit is energy level, because particularly in the beginning of the week, the first, let's say, 4 days, I didn't have my same energy during the day and during my runs. I run at about 20, 22 hours fasted, and during my runs towards the beginning of the week, I felt a little hollow, a little almost, I've got to say, as if I had fasted the prior day. I didn't have it. I didn't have the fuel. And even during the day, in the first few days, I felt a little bit, sometimes lightheaded when I stood up. Again, almost like I was on a fast. And that did dissipate towards the end. It wasn't as bad. It wasn't very noticeable. So maybe part of that was some adaptation. The body needs time to adapt to when you throw changes at it. But I have another theory about it that I want to share. I eat one meal a day, and I eat until I'm full. I don't stop eating until I'm full, which I did this week. I was eating, I started with 3 pounds and pretty much did that every day. In 2 days, I went to 4 pounds, which I don't know how I got that down. It was a little difficult. And I was overstuffing myself, but still kind of lacking on the energy. And here's my theory. With the ground beef, especially the way I prepared it, I think a lot of the fat renders out. In the crock pot, it renders out. On the grill, a lot of it, you lose it as you cook it. And so that fat, typically when I eat steaks, typically I'll have ground beef. I might have a pound or pound and a half at a meal. I mean, I have ground beef all the time, but it's not, let's say that it's like a side dish. My entree would be some kind of beef. It might be like a ribeye or two. Now, my steaks I cook in a sous vide, which is a cool, that's cooking like at 130 degrees. And the fat doesn't render out. It's pretty much intact. And when you take it out of the sous vide, I put a sear on the top of it, which darkens the top layer, but all the fat is still kind of in place and intact. And I think I was getting less fat, less energy eating the ground beef this way, and it showed up in my energy level. That's my theory. I think it's the only thing I can come up with that makes any sense, because I was typically, if I stuff myself like I was with this ground beef, I'll have no trouble getting through the day the next day. But this was a little odd. But anyway, that was my finding. A little bit strange. This was a strange. I wasn't expecting the energy drop, especially eating as much as I did.
10. Please discuss any other changes worth mentioning, e.g. grocery costs, ketone readings, non-scale victories, cravings.
Yeah, I don't measure ketones. Didn't note anything exceptional about cravings. The things I gave up, the cream in the coffee was my big concern, but frankly, that went pretty well. I just found out if I go to a dark roast, a bold roast, that is pretty good if you get a decent one and it's black. So I may be able to continue and have no cream in my coffee from here on out, which would be sort of a victory. But Grocery cost, you know, I stocked up before this on ground beef, and I bought, like last Saturday, I bought a bunch, and then I said, oh, I better get some more. I went out on Sunday, bought more, and then holy smokes, about 3 days into this hamburger week, seeing how I was going through it, I went out and bought another supply. I mean, I don't know what the cost was. I don't even want to calculate it, but there were significant grocery costs just keeping me fed this week, but it was all in the interest of science.
11. Did you use salt? 12. Other than salt, what spices, seasonings did you use?
I used salt and pepper only. I use salt liberally on everything. I sweat a lot when I run. I lose a lot of fluid, and I was concerned about electrolytes. I didn't really want to go there, and I'm glad I didn't. I was already with this change, as I mentioned earlier, feeling lightheaded and a little lacking energy. So I can only imagine if I'd given up the salt too, it might have been even worse. But yeah, I used both salt and pepper.
13. Were any days out of the 7 noticeably harder or easier than others? 14. How does WOBO compare to the hardest and easiest dietary challenges you faced in your life?
Well, as I mentioned previously, the hardest part was day 1. I had that stomach distress issue at night, and that was relatively minor. So that was the hardest part of this WOBO hamburger week. I mean, not a huge deal. I mean, it doesn't compare at all. If I look at the hardest dietary challenge I faced in my life, no comparison. I mean, my challenge was I faced a couple years ago, transforming from 350 pounds to 160. That was a challenge, and the hardest part of that challenge was back in the beginning. I did a 14-day fast. That was a challenge. So yeah, that was, you know, this little week here of eating ground beef was no comparison.
15. Did anyone join you for a nothing but ground beef meal at any point?
Nobody joined me for any part of this hamburger week, but to the question about isn't WOBO boring, yes, it is boring, and it's also this particular version of WOBO, the hamburger only version, is not only boring, but it's not satisfying, and I want to talk about that a little bit. Because this is something I kind of picked up throughout the week. I mean, I didn't go into this hamburger week thinking that, oh, this could be maybe the way I'm going to live my life from now on. Not at all. I mean, I know myself, and I know that I like to have some variation, and not the same thing every day. I mean, I'm fine with just sticking with meat, or even possibly just with beef, but just hamburger is not the choice. I did find it boring, you know, just kind of repetitive and boring from that standpoint. But the unsatisfying part of it, I think it goes to the nature of the meat itself, the hamburger. And if you think about it, hamburger is extra processing. It's not just meat. It's the grinding. So here's another layer of processing on top of it. So it's a little bit one step more removed from nature, let's say. And that processing, grinding it all up, it's almost like a pre-chewing, and it takes away from some of the eating experience. You know, it's easy to eat hamburger, you know, because you don't have to chew as much, and it's kind of already, you know, broken down. The structure is different than the meat originally was. If I compare it to, again, when I eat a steak, it's a different experience. You know, there's the, you know, you cook the steak, but then there's the sawing through it, the cutting it up, cutting through the tendons and the fat and the sinew of the structure. And then there's the chewing and the taste. It's a different experience. It's a more complete experience, and I'm going to say a more satisfying experience that is missing with the ground beef. Ground beef is sort of like the ground meat in particular, but the grinding process makes it sort of like that processing takes something out of the experience that I found unsatisfying. And I'm looking forward tonight. I've got steaks lined up, and I want, you know, I'll be able to confirm this theory I have tonight when I dig into some steaks. For some reason, I lost some of Mike's sound clips, so I'm just going to put the next two questions up on the screen. Essentially, question 17 goes to, would I consider extending WOBO for 2 weeks, and if so, how long? And question 18 is, how has my perspective of an all-meat diet changed as a result of this WOBO? I'll just say that I am going to continue with a couple of changes. I'm going to get off the ground beef. I'm going to stay with beef, though. So I'm going to go to a beef only, and I'm going to bring back butter. But other than that, no other changes. I'm still going to go without cream in the coffee, and without cheese, and without pork rinds and avocado, anything else. So I'm going to make a couple tweaks. I just want to give it a chance. In absence of the, you know, I've tested the hamburger out. I want to try it just with a regular assortment of meats. Let's say primarily muscle meat, steaks, various steaks. With, I'm sure at some point I'll work in some ground beef as well. But how has my perspective changed? It's a deeper perspective now. It's enhanced a little bit. I've gained experience this week, and I think now I got an understanding some of the nuances of you know, drilling down and focusing in like this. You kind of gain a deeper perspective. So if anybody ever wants to talk about what it's like to live on hamburger only, I can jump in and tell them. But my overall perspective on the meat only hasn't changed. It's still, I think, you know, I'm going to live a primary meat-centric lifestyle, a carnivore lifestyle. It's just I gained some additional perspective this week.
19. Nick Hebert observes that there isn't enough K1 in beef to meet the RDA. How concerned are you about the prospect of this or any other micronutrient deficiency on WOBO? And 20. Which came first, the intelligence or the carnivory?
I'm not concerned about any specific nutrient, K1, what have you. I'm not a big believer that man really has a full grasp of what a person's requirements are, like the RDAs. I think this is a little more than just you know, a guesstimate here, you need this stuff. I'm also not a believer that taking anything externally, a supplementation of anything man-made is going to get you anywhere. I've done some of it in my life, and I don't have any confidence at all in that the form that it comes in is effective, or that it's uptaken. This is just my opinion. It's just an expensive way to sell people, the latest and greatest thing. What I would say is, what does interest me is, for example, yesterday in your interview with Robin, she was talking about the nose to tail eating strategy as a way of a diversification of getting all various nutrients, and I'm sympathetic to that, and I would agree with that. That does make more sense. It's more of a more balanced, let's say, if you're eating organs, brains, whatnot. If I get concerned enough at some point, I'll go down that road and incorporate more of the animal into my diet. Right now I don't. I'm just not there. I'm mainly, I do different cuts of meat. I try to move around, from flank to top to round to shank to, I try to move around a bit. And I do, pork is on my general carnivore plan. Not right now during this testing phase, but I do diversify with some pork. Now, pork is, I'm going to say probably not as effective of a food choice. It's just, it tastes darn good, and I love bacon, and there's certain cuts that are just, I like it just for variation and taste. But as far as beef goes, I'm not worried about it. I somehow managed, I went for decades as an adult with no concern whatsoever. I ate totally crap food, a horrible diet, junk, and never really concerned about K1 or K2 or P or whatever. And somehow I didn't get diseases or I'm healthy still. Somehow I came through. So I'm not, now that I've really kind of really taken interest in what I put into my body, and I make sure it's definitely, this is much more nutritious what I eat now. I'm less concerned about now the way I eat. And what I'll just say is, again, I don't know if the questioner, Nick, whatever his name is implying that you need plants. I would definitely not agree with that. I would never go the route of, let's say, oh, I better eat some plants to stay healthy and get these nutrients I need. No, if I ever become concerned about it, I would just go with into some different organ, the liver and perhaps brains or perhaps different parts of the animal. As far as what came first, obviously I think some intelligence came first in order to develop the skills, the hunting skills and the tool making skills, and then that led to some additional carnivory and more available meat, which reinforced and made the brains bigger. It was just a perpetual snowball. It kept cycling onward and upward, but in some intelligence, there had to be a spark of intelligence there, which came first. Well, either the length or the complexity of this video I'm making is causing my computer to, to complain, and it looks like it's almost at capacity. So I'm going to wrap it up. This update on my WOBO week of Hamburger. I will answer, though, the question that everyone leaves to the end, the $64,000 question. I've never publicly, I don't believe, answered it before, but I'll put it in now before I sign off. And this goes to me, it's the constipation and regularity aspect. that everyone's so intrigued about. Constipation, since I've been carnivore, has been non-existent. I have never been constipated, not even once. I do read some accounts of people who are eating meat and in becoming constipated. I've seen this a few times, and I have to wonder, what in the world are they eating? Something. I mean, it just totally conflicts with my experience. So what does happen, though, is the opposite of constipation. It's quite frequently the elimination is very loose, let's just say. Very loose, almost liquid. Now, this seems to just go in cycles. It sort of maybe depends on the type of meat I'm eating, or the balance of fats and meats, or how much I eat, or how much I exercise. I don't know. It's sort of, I mean, on a weekly basis, I might see some of that for a few days. But at no point is it like painful or a problem. The same with the regularity. This is another one I don't get. Are there studies that show that daily bulky elimination adds to your life? Those people live longer? Do you get a gold star for daily eliminations? I don't get it. I mean, I don't have that anymore. Since I went carnivore, okay, regularity has become much more irregular. It might be a few days consecutive, but then it might be a day off, and then on again, and then it might be a couple days off. I think the record one time, I'm going to say, it was like 4 days, and I was starting to wonder what's going on, but then it came back again. Like I said, never at any point with this kind of even with the regularity, it was never. I never had to go and felt I couldn't. I just didn't need to go. So, I'm not concerned about it. So I would just say, yes, in the carnivore world, it's different. Both of those things are different. The constipation and the regularity, they're different. Problematic? No, not for me, not in the least. It's just different. Takes you a little bit getting used to. In the beginning, you're wondering what's going on, but once you just kind of see how it goes, it's not an issue at all. So I hope that answers that question, and I've tried to answer everything completely, and I don't know what else I can add at this point, other than just to restate that Mike, I liked your interviews, Robin and Anat and Deborah. That was great. I would encourage other people to do that in the future. Maybe that's something you can do on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. I found it fascinating. I hope, again, if there are any of my viewers that did the WOBO week, put your comments, put any observations you have in the comments, answer all the questions or a few of the questions, or whatever questions you think people might want to hear about. Explain your experience, and we'll look for that later. And yeah, Mike, thanks for opening up this test. It was interesting. I did learn something, and that was the reason I went into it. And I'm going to continue on beef only, at least another week, but it's going to be a much more enjoyable week because I got ribeyes and I got all kinds of good stuff on deck. And I'm going to add butter back in, which I like to put on my steak. I put a pat of butter on it. So that's going to make next week a breeze. And then maybe down the road, I'll start adding in eggs and other things slowly. But anyway, we'll see how it goes, one day at a time. Thanks everyone. I'm going to cut it off here. I think I've talked a lot. This video is probably quite long today. So have a great day, and like, subscribe, and continue to give me your comments. I appreciate them all. Thanks very much. Take care.